Hello and welcome to Pat O'Keefe's World of Curiosities. And tonight's guest is a special friend of mine, Jerry Sword from Russell County, Virginia, where I used to live, long way away. Now, Jerry's got an interesting, I want to say, creative dossier. He is an author. In fact, he has a new book coming out. We're going to talk about that. He's a filmmaker. I think, Jerry, you've got, what, 4 films that you've either worked on or that you've directed. And he's also a festival director. So, Jerry, which one of these venues would you like to start with?
Oh, wow. Let's just cut right to the storytelling festival since that's coming up here in the next little bit.
Okay.
All
And
right.
that is on October 11th, right?
Correct. That's going to be on October the 11th at the Russell Theater, the historic Russell Theater in Lebanon, Virginia. And the Russell has quite a colorful history itself. So it's the perfect venue for our storytelling festival. And all the other things that you've mentioned that I've did, I feel like have led up to this because it's all no matter what your title or what you're doing, it's all about the story. That's first, and that's the most important thing. And when I was coming up, growing up, had some interesting, unexplainable things happen in my life over the years, and that's also a big part of this. And the idea of it came primarily from the fact that when I grew up over there in Russell County, we were miles away from anything, and I think that's difficult to grasp unless you've lived that life. Desolation, is pretty much the best word to describe it. And my parents didn't go into town a lot. I grew up on a farm, and so every waking moment they had, they were working on that farm, and going to town was just something they had to do at some point. And so when school was out for the summer, I was stuck. The school was the only chance I had to see really anything outside of that place for a number of years. But the one thing that I do remember well is on the nights that we would sit on my front porch, and my parents would be there, and neighbors and various people would come by, and there was always a story brewing, and the everything you could imagine, from ghosts to plane crashes to uh, God knows what. But there was that consistent occurrence on a nightly basis throughout the summer. Was if you sat there as a child, as I did, and kept an open mind and an open ear, then you would hear things that were just incredible. Things that were as good as any book or any movie or anything the imagination could come up with. So I carried that with me through a lot of my life, all of my life. And a few years ago, Shane Farmer, who is the director of the Russell Theater, also a guy who came up in Russell County, and he got a hold of me one day and he said, "Hey, let's do something." And this was the idea I had, and I thought that Russell County needed it. That's to me, it's also important to keep that art alive, to keep those stories going, because the world is changing. The world's changing very quickly, and these are things that I feel need to last, and we need to hold on to these things and not let artificial intelligence or whatever take these things away from us. So that's our goal, is to keep the stories alive and to do what we can to help out the Russell. It's a beautiful venue there in the town of Lebanon. It was closed down for a couple of decades, I think. Um, but the Russell was actually a place where my imagination was sparked a long time ago, because as a boy I saw movies there like Back to the Future and Gremlins and anything you could imagine that was out at the time I saw there at the Russell. And so I think it kind of brings things full circle to be able to go back there with this festival. And we want to keep people coming in and keep traffic flowing through the place, and show the community really what a great venue we have. And Tales from the Front Porch gives me an opportunity to contribute to that in my own way.
Well, and what I love about this, and disclaimer, I'll be telling some stories of my own stories this year,
You you
October 11th.
are you are going to be one of the highlights of this festival, and I'm
Oh,
looking very forward to having you. Um, I can't wait.
well, I'm looking forward to it too. And you're so right. We need to preserve the stories of our experiences in these mountains. And there was a lot of paranormal occurrences that happened to a lot of folks. Now you mentioned, and I have to tell people that there's one thing that seems to permeate through all of your creative endeavors, and that is the paranormal. And you mentioned that there were some things that had happened to you as a child that really set you on that path. Is there one incident in particular, one experience that you had that opened up that door and you said, I'm really interested in this. I want to know more?
Well, as a kid, I was scared of this sort of thing, and it's really not something like you run into people who everybody has a ghost story, and there are many people who are obsessed with this sort of thing, and they find a lot of entertainment in it. That's something really I never wanted to know about. I was a terrified little boy growing up back there in the mountains, and my family had moved here when I was. We moved here when I was 6 years old. Um, and I don't know if there's necessarily one thing. There's a whole list of things. There's a whole bunch of things that happened over the years, and it was kind of in hindsight that, looking back on it, I hesitate to say that I've put it all together, because I still have a lot of questions. But when you get to the point when you're as old as I am and you look back on it, you know that there's no way this was all coincidence. And it began as early as when I was 6 years old, and I remember being fearful of this old farmhouse from the moment that I stepped foot into it. And over the years, there were, I saw things, heard things, experienced things. You know, one of the things that I think about is the house itself did not have any modern amenities. It didn't even have indoor plumbing when we first moved to Virginia. And, that was something that came along later. But as far as HVAC and, the great things that modern life affords us, we didn't have that. And it was not uncommon to go into this one bedroom in that house, in one of the upstairs bedrooms, in the middle of summer when it was really just extremely hot. And that one room was always just cold. It would chill me to the bone to walk in there, no matter what time of year. And so I don't, what troubles me the most, I guess, about it is that I wasn't the only one who experienced it. I have family members who experienced their own things there. My older brother, I write about him a lot, and he he had some things happen when he was on leave from the military. He had just came back from overseas, and he was a tough Marine by then, but something in that house scared him to the point where he was running out the front door. Now, I didn't know this when I was a kid. So, fast forward, and when I turned 25, 26 years old, I'm 1,000 miles away from Virginia in my brother's house in South Florida. And everybody had kind of disappeared on us one night, and it was just the two of us left talking way into the morning. And out of nowhere, he says, "Hey, just out of curiosity, did you ever have anything strange happen to you up there in that old house?" And this is a conversation we never had. And you can bet we've had it a lot of times since. But it's just like I said, the most troubling thing to me is that I wasn't the only one. And as time went on, my mother fell ill, and we got to the point where my father had passed away, and the only ones still living there were my mother and myself. And around that time, around the time I was 17 years old, I would go to school, and then I would work after school. I would get home around 11 o'clock at night and, sleep until it was time to go to school again. And there was a point where I started hearing these obnoxious noises. And they didn't start out that way. They started out as something you barely notice, but you still notice. And when you live in an old house like that, with the creaky floorboards and the thin walls, and the house was built prior to 1920, and you kind of pay attention to some things, but I was old enough by then not to pay too much attention to it, except that it kept happening. And the longer it went on, the more obnoxious the noises became. And it was clear to me there at the end that what I was hearing is someone walking around outside my bedroom door, down the hallway, into the room across the hall. And I dismissed it at the time, as it being my mother, because she was a restless person. And my father had died, a little over a year prior to that. So it wouldn't have been out of the question for my mom to just be restless and up walking around the house at night. And so one night it happened, and I had got to the point where I would turn on the radio and leave the radio on at night to just kind of drown out any outside noise. And it just became louder and louder. And so one night I just got up out of bed thinking it was my mom. And I opened the door to ask her what's going on. And when I did, there was just pitch black, nothing. And just empty space, and it was quiet again. And so a few hours later, I laid there for a few hours until it was time to get up for school. And the first thing I asked was, "What are you doing walking around the house at all hours of the night? I can't sleep." And at that point, she kind of made me aware of how serious her health had declined, because I didn't grasp that at 17 years old. But the fact was that my mother couldn't have climbed those stairs even if she had wanted to. And once I realized that, I mean, I can't tell you what that feels like, especially to a person who doesn't go looking for this kind of thing, because I don't go looking for it. I just happen to experience a lot of it. And so once I realized the gravity of that moment, I didn't go back to that upstairs bedroom. For the rest of the time I lived in that house, I slept on the couch downstairs. just across from my mother's room. And it's such a strange place. You know, I have some people from time to time want to know where it is, and I don't tell them because I have this really bizarre relationship with the place. Um, am I terrified of it? Yes. Do I revere it at the same time? Absolutely. And there are just I have such a conflict within me about that entire time period in my life because I love the way I grew up. If I could go back to that, to being that age and feeling the way you feel when you're that young and carefree and the world's your oyster, then I would absolutely go back. You couldn't pay me to spend another night in the house. And you know my family feels the same way. My brothers feel the same way, and it's bizarre and it's tugged at me for a long time. And you know, I think probably the reason that it's a common thread through everything I do is because it's just been so instilled in me for my entire life. Because even after I left and I left that town and got on with my adult life, I would still go back to it. I would still dream about it. I would dream I was still, you know, I would go to sleep and think that I was waking up back in that bedroom. And I feel like something has always kind of pulled me back there. And so for a lot of years, I I would just drive there on occasion and drive by and never go in, but just reminisce because that house came with about 60 acres of wide open farmland, and that was my backyard as a kid. And so I do miss that part of it. Um, but I would go back there from time to time, and I never like my mother had ended up selling the property to another member of the family, and I don't think I'm on bad terms with that side of the family. I just don't think the terms are necessarily great. So, you know, I never wanted to ask permission to go back into a place that I felt like um, belonged to me anyway. And so I would do that. And I eventually got to the point just a short while back where I did go back in. And the pull that I've had to the place seemed to kind of make sense because on that day I was walking around. You have to imagine the earth and the trees and the brush swallowing this place. And I was walking around the outside of the house and I went to a closed in back porch. And I don't know what I was looking for, but I walked into the room on this porch. And when I did, there was a ladder back chair there with a woven bottom. And my father had made that chair by hand, and it had been sitting there for 35 years or so, out of the weather, pristine condition, just like the day he left it. And so it's sitting in my basement at the moment.
Is that the
Uh,
poster for the festival? Was that
no,
the
no,
no?
that's not the one. But the one I have is a lot less theatrical than that. But it's definitely an inspiration behind what you see on that poster.
Hmm. Hmm.
And all those things I think tie together. But and the thing I failed to mention is, whatever I was hearing, I heard going into a very specific room.
Mhm.
And years later, I found out that the things that happened to my brother happened in that room.
Mhm.
And he told me about, probably the most terrifying thing that somebody could imagine. He had came home from basic training and had just got done at Paris Island, and he goes in that room to go to bed one night, and just as he's drifting off to sleep, something sits down on the edge of the bed, something unseen, and he um, swears to me that you could see the impression on the mattress, and it started pulling the blankets off of him. And so he jumped up and down the stairs he went, and again, found a corner to stay in until daylight came. And he never went back up there either. And it's just, I don't know. It carries a lot of weight when you both experience the same sort of thing and you just didn't talk about it.
Mhm. Well, this is definitely carried through with your work. You directed Season of the Witch in 2022, and that was about four women practitioners in the mountains. And then This Place is Haunted in 2023. So, two of the four, and I have to give you a call out. You were a corrections officer in the movie Grizzly Park way back in the day. That was
Uh,
2008. And your first documentary was called Brothers, and that was about the Civil War, wasn't it?
no, no. Brothers,
No?
Brothers was a short.
Ah,
It did have a paranormal element to it, but it was really just an experiment of a learning process, if you will. This Place is Haunted was based on the Civil War,
okay.
and so actually, um, This Place is Haunted was filmed in the early 2010s, and but it didn't get distribution until 2023.
Mm,
So it's a bit dated, but a lot of people are watching it. So
that's awesome. Well,
there's a lot of interest out there.
so what is your next artistic endeavor in the as far as films?
I haven't completely committed to that yet. We have we have a film that's almost completed, and I'm not sure of the status of it. But the next thing that I personally want to do is completely off the topic of the paranormal. So I want to explore Billy the Kid,
Very
and
cool.
he's one of my favorite characters, in the probably my single favorite character in the Old West, and we want to take a look at that. But I don't have I don't have any sort of estimated time frame as to when that will happen.
Mhm.
But that will be the next thing that I set my sights on.
That actually sounds pretty fantastic. I'm like you. I like the Old West and those old stories. So, all righty. And now you've been published recently. So tell us a little bit about that. And also, you've decided to bite the bullet and write your first book. And I will tell folks out there that just reading what Jerry has written, where I've been involved in a project, you're an extremely gifted writer.
Thank
So
you.
I'm excited to see that come out. So tell us all about it.
Okay, so I have a couple of short stories that are published. I had a story in an anthology called 24 Tales, which is published by Howling Hills Publishing. And they wanted to collect an anthology of true to life ghost stories, not something that's embellished or uh, designed for a reader. But I have to give Terry Shaw credit. They seek out the real genuine things, and I can't remember um, every state that was represented in 24 Tales, but there's quite a few geographical areas that he covers. I think maybe Vermont was even one of them. So I had a story published in there, and this year I have another one coming out in 25 Tales. So that's the I guess the point of the anthology, and the title is, in 2024 you get 24 tales, and 2052, God willing, we'll get 52 tales and such. But those stories are um, really, I mean, they're biographical. They're things that happened there on the farm. And so as I was writing this stuff for Howling Hills, I thought, you know what? I mean, this is something that has followed me for my entire life. And I think it's all tied together. I don't know really how to explain that, but I think some people are just haunted. And so I thought, it's time to write the book. I'm just going to write the book. So I am presently working on the manuscript. I'm a good ways through it, and so I'm very happy with it. Nobody's got to read it yet, so but I'm writing the book Corn Valley, which is the name of the place where I grew up, and I'm aiming for 2026, but we'll see. Publishing, as you know, is a long process. It's honestly it can be a lot longer than the writing process. So we'll see what happens, but it will come out at some point.
How can people get a hold of you, Jerry, if they have any questions or if they just want to make contact?
Just reach out through Facebook. That's the easiest way to find anybody these days. But
That's true.
Definitely Facebook, and Tales from the Front Porch has a Facebook page as well. And I'm not hard to find.
All right. And is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Just to keep an open mind. A lot of people find can be closed off to this subject matter, and I can't say it always makes sense. But I do know that we live in a universe that we haven't even scratched the surface with our understanding of the way things really are.
I agree. Now, speaking of that, we're going to do something fun. I got these
Okay.
new little cards. Yeah, see these new little cards. Okay. They're called the magical messages. So I'm going to pick out 3 cards, Jerry, and let you pick out 1, 2, and 3. And the noise you hear in the background, pay no attention to that. That's my crazy dogs. And I had 3 of them, Jerry. The smallest one weighs 85 pounds. Okay.
Wow.
So here we go. This is the first one. Hope that's right side up. That's the first one, then the second one, and the third one. So which one
Okay.
appeals to you the most?
The one in the middle.
This one. All right. So let us see what message the universe has for our friend Jerry. It says, have the bravery and curiosity it takes to dance gracefully with change. chaos can be transformative. So now you've received a message from the universe with that. I actually love these little cards. I think they're really fun, and it's part of kind of bibliomancy. Your great granny in the mountains may have done it. I've seen my granny do it. She'd open the Bible. She'd have a question or a prayer, right, and she'd
Mm-hmm.
want the answer to it, and so she would open the Bible and read the first verse that she saw. And it's a part of bibliomancy. So it's really part of our mountain tradition. So remember, you may find chaos coming, but it's going to be very transformative for you. So I love that. All right,
Excellent.
Jerry, thank you for
Chaos is
being
my
on the
middle
show.
name.
That's a good thing. So Jerry, thank you so much. You've been a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much, Pat.
I'd love to have you back on sometime. And I know that the festival, again, it's October 11th. It's Tales from the Front Porch. You can see below Jerry's name. And it's going to be in Lebanon, Virginia. And what's the name of the theater?
The Russell
It's
Theater.
the Russell Theater.
Tickets are available on their website.
All right. So we hope
And
to see some
it's
of you.
going to be an entire day. We will have yourself, Jim Lloyd, Franklin Horton, who sold over 1 million copies of his books.
Yeah.
We will have local and regional authors set up to sell their books as well and get to meet their reading public. So we hope everybody will come on out for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's going to be big names and small names, but the one thing that we all have are stories to offer. And of course, my stories are going to be, personal and also some that I've heard in the mountains. I think we have 45 minutes apiece, something like that, with 15 minutes Q&A. Something, is that correct? I hope I have the format.
You can have whatever you want, Pat.
That's always a good number for me, although I do like to talk. So, to our audience, thank you for being here, because without you, it would be a very lonely place. And until next time, and thank you again, Jerry.
Thanks,
Stay
Pat.
curious. Bye.